Please join me in prayer. Loving and gracious God, we thank you for your presence, for your Holy Spirit. May you stir about us, stir within us, stir our minds to know your wisdom, stir our hearts to know your love, stir our spirits that we might be inspired to go and share in your love in your name. May the words upon my mouth and the meditations upon all of our hearts be acceptable to you, holy in your sight. In Christ's name, amen. You know, whenever we come across this text in Luke, whenever it comes around, everybody focuses on that one big thing, right? Zacchaeus was short. Yeah, it's in the text. I don't deny it. He's short in stature. I get it. Well, as someone who's a little bit shorter in stature myself, I think it's probably a little unfair to focus so much on that. And not just because I have any insecurities at all about it, but I think it actually deflects a little bit from a bigger message and story. You know, the other day when I was talking to my wife about this scripture passage, she pointed out something kind of interesting. In the Disney movie Encanto, if you're familiar with it, there is a flashback scene. This is spoiler-free, where the matriarch of the family, Alma, who goes by the other name of Abuela, grandmother, is remembering her earliest encounters with her soon-to-be husband. Now, she's in a festival in the town, and the crowds are packing in the streets, so she decides to climb up onto a lamppost to search across the crowd, where she goes and sees him on the other side, also on a lamppost, looking back at her. Now, it's not that they were necessarily short, but in the mass of people, they needed to get up above the crowd so they could search for what they felt was the most important, each other. It says a little bit about this character, Zacchaeus, that he's climbing up on this tree. So that at that moment, he's willing to climb up on a tree to get up beyond the crowd, to seek out what he felt was the most important at that moment. In this case, Jesus. Now, it's probably no accident that Luke places this particular story after the happenings of chapter 18. There we hear, for example, last week's parable of the humble tax collector and the self-assured Pharisee in verse 9, as well as an encounter with a rich ruler who walks away saddened after being asked to give away his wealth in verse 18. And here, in this particular passage, we have what you would call the best of both worlds. You have a rich chief tax collector. Small in stature, we hear, and yet he seems to loom pretty large in status and in power over those in his community. And when he hears this commotion, he sees the crowds, he knows something or someone is approaching, but he can't see who it is. Now, one thing that is striking to me in this passage is how he resolves the problem. Being a chief tax collector, we could suppose that he could have perhaps thrown his station around, like he has done in the past to get his riches. Throw it around in order to make his way through the crowd and maybe approach Jesus as a VIP. But Zacchaeus doesn't do that. He doesn't flaunt his status to get to Jesus. Instead, he does two things that are actually somewhat undignified, even shameful for a person of his status. First of all, he runs ahead, we hear, not walking with his head held high with pride, but he runs. And where does he run? He runs to a tree to climb up onto it. Both of these acts of running and then climbing up on a tree just to get a better glimpse of Jesus, they're undignified for a wealthy, powerful adult of his station. In fact, they kind of seem somewhat childlike in his unabashed interest in Jesus. And that points back to yet another passage in chapter 18, verses 15 through 17, which precedes that one about the rich man, where Jesus suggests that all should receive the kingdom of God like a little child. Now, what's Zacchaeus' motivation for doing all of this? To be honest, the text doesn't really say. Perhaps we can assume that for whatever reason, Zacchaeus is ready for a change. He's lived his life as one who fleeces the poor, the vulnerable, taking extra in taxes and scraping a little bit off the top for himself. It's obvious that it's worked for him so far because he is rich because of it. But as rich as he is in money, as big as he is in status, perhaps he realizes, just as the tax collector in that parable, that he is indeed not what he should be. And he's in need of a new way of life. For whatever reason, he unabashedly rises above the crowd and below his station to get a glimpse of someone who might help him, show him the way. Now, he doesn't call out to Jesus. He doesn't try to get his attention that way. But it seems that Jesus sees him. Moreover, he sees through to him, to just what Zacchaeus needs in that moment. A chance to start again, to transform his ways and make things right again with those whom he's mistreated. To reestablish justice in a community that he has wronged. Jesus gives him that chance, showing him grace that others would never have. To show him that this day was a beginning, a new beginning for him. And all he needs to do is take the chance. Now, the people's response to Zacchaeus being chosen by Jesus is probably the natural one, we might assume, especially if you happen to be one of the victims of his injustice. He had indeed harmed a good deal of people by his actions as tax collector, and there's no questioning that. And there's no question in my mind that Jesus is fully aware of that injustice as well, and cared about it deeply. It's only a few passages later, in the end of chapter 19, that Jesus enters Jerusalem. And his first stop, he makes to the temple, to overturn the tables of the money changers. It is true that Jesus cares about justice, as God cares about justice, more than rituals and religious offerings. In Isaiah's text today, that's also made clear. That Judah and Jerusalem, who are nicknamed in this passage as Sodom and Gomorrah because of their pending destruction if things do not change. They aren't in danger because of doing the wrong sacrifices or worshiping incorrectly. But rather, it's because of their need to be focused on doing good instead, seeking justice, rescuing the oppressed, defending the orphans, pleading for the widows. God cares about justice, demands it of God's children for God's children. But also we see that God offers them, as God's children, a promise of grace. That though they may have sins like scarlet, they will be made like snow. they will be washed clean. God seeks justice, but offers grace and love, so that justice may be achieved through a changed heart that is shaped by that love and grace. Jesus seeks justice, but offers grace and love to this rich tax man that he sees humbling himself on a tree, because he sees something in him that perhaps no one else sees, and perhaps Zacchaeus doesn't see in himself, that his heart and his life can be turned around. And in doing so, he can change those of an entire community around him. Zacchaeus is offered love and grace as a gift. And then others who are like him may also turn around and seek to share that grace and make the world a more just place. Given that it is October 30th, 2022, I was reminded of the fact that it has only been a mere 505 years ago tomorrow that Martin Luther posted his set of 95 theses, or debate points, on the church door in Wittenberg, Germany. It's a series of theses that was not his first series to post. Prior ones also existed that he had put up, including a set of 97 that concerned mainly theological questions, questions about God and debates about belief. And he expected those to be big, controversial debates. But mostly he was met with silence. But this latest one, this 95, however, which he didn't think would be too controversial by comparison, asked questions about the sale of indulgences by the church. Instead of big God questions, he asked the heart of a question of justice. Whether requiring payments for guarantees of the souls of loved ones, being freed from purgatory to get to heaven, whether that was really the right thing to do. In doing so, he questioned the income of the church for many of its building projects, among other things. And it was this question about how the church got its finances and how the church built things instead of working with people. It sparked not only debate, but it also started some attacks on him, and ultimately this little thing called the Protestant Reformation. For Martin Luther, it wasn't that he was trying to start this Reformation at all. He was just asking some questions that arose from his faith. A faith that he had wrestled with for years and years, particularly with that idea of how someone is saved, how someone is justified by God. For so long he thought that he was inadequate and not worthy of that salvation, that he wasn't doing enough, giving enough to be worthy of receiving God's salvation. And yet he ultimately realized that in truth he really wasn't doing enough or giving enough, but it wasn't about that. It wasn't about trying to earn it, but God was giving it to him freely as an act of grace, to be received out of love. It wasn't about doing enough, because to God we are enough. Enough for that gift of grace that frees us to live that grace out for ourselves and for others. Now ultimately that knowledge that it was through grace and not doing enough that God saves, that Martin Luther was inspired to ask this question of justice about the indulgences and the 95 statements. About why the church then should suggest or expect payment to guarantee the salvation of others. Again, God seeks justice. Justice for God's children, that all are cared for and not oppressed or mistreated, that all are fed and clothed and shown compassion and fairness. More than offerings or sacrifices, God seeks justice. But at the heart of that justice, there is the grace of God. The fact that God seeks justice out of love for us, not out of a need to get everything perfect. God seeks us to love one another as we have been loved, to want to treat one another as we would like to be treated. And when we acknowledge that gracious gift of love and life that we have been given, then we realize just how God has declared us to be God's children, that we are enough. And perhaps our response should be to seek that same thing for others. Ultimately, justice and grace are intertwined. And that grace feeds a need for justice, and justice needs to be tempered by grace. Just saying that God loves everyone and not calling people into account to treat other people justly and with love, to actually love your neighbor as yourself, and all that implies ignores the heart of the good news and replaces it with a type of grace that omits the power of transformation that love provides. And just seeking justice without grace can result in this endless quest for payback, for revenge, for things that are wrong, with no hope offered for the possibility of redemption or forgiveness. They're intertwined, justice and grace. They work together, empowered by God's love to create God's kingdom. And we're co-creators in that. We are co-creators with God, building God's kingdom reality, a reality where mistreatment and oppression, hatred and division are overcome. Not through equal measures of the same, not through revenge, but through love and grace that can show the powerful alternative reality of what is possible. A reality where people are indeed called out for their misdeeds, but shown another way. A way that transforms themselves and their communities. A reality that we can boldly lift up and speak for those who have been forgotten and pushed down, so they don't feel alone. And those who have been doing the pushing down and forgetting are given a mirror so they realize their wrongs. In this church in Batesville, perhaps we're called to ask questions for ourselves and for one another. Where are the areas that we help to build that reality together? Or each to ourselves? Where are the areas where we see a need for justice, and where are the spaces that we need to offer and receive grace? Are there perhaps individuals or groups that we judge too quickly without getting to know their story, their experiences, to walk a mile or two in their shoes? Are there experiences that we have had where we wish we had done something different, something else said? Or maybe not speaking anything at all? Are we in need of resolution or healing or forgiveness for these things or others? Do we see problems in our community, a place where more can be done, or if only someone would take a first step, say a first word, in order to make a change? As children of God, as members of the body of Christ, as co-creators in God's kingdom, we are empowered by God's love and grace to build and to mend, to build bridges and mend hearts. We're called to go and call others in high and low places, insiders and outcasts, friends and strangers, to come to the table together, to make a new way, to share a feast that nourishes everyone, great and small. Zacchaeus, he wasn't perfect, but he was called by Jesus on behalf of a gracious, loving God, and in receiving that call, change and justice were possible. So what more is possible with God in our lives, in our communities, in our world? May God's grace and justice abound, and may we share it boldly and unabashedly, just like children of God.